Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 413. I am very, very excited about today's show. You know, after you've done 413 episodes of a podcast, I will admit that sometimes you might feel like you're, kind of clutching at straws to kind of think of new and different angles. But today we have that. We have an amazing guest to talk about the extreme side of obesity and what can happen when you get to the extreme end of obesity, which some people will resort to bariatric surgery. And I want to delve into kind of why this happens, what we're kind of looking at when this happens, because, if you're going to get massive surgery and huge amounts of weight is going to fall off the body, there's going to be some downsides to that. It's not all roses, and I don't know, in my head I'm thinking actually there's probably more downsides than upsides because, it's so extreme, there's already a lot of damage on the body. But anyway, I get it. I'm waffling. I'm fascinated by today's show. So to join me on today's show, I have Nicola Ludlam-Raine. I'm hoping I've pronounced that, right. Nicola, hello.
Hello, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Did I pronounce it okay?
Yeah, even I can't pronounce it. Yeah, Ludlam-Raine.
I'll take victory. Let's go. Well, we need to introduce you to my audience. You need to say, hey, this is what I do. But more than anything, I'm interested in why you got into the work that you do. What inspired you to follow a career in nutrition?
Yeah, so I qualified 10 years ago now to be a registered dietitian. From school, all I knew is that I was interested in sport and how the human body works. So I did sports science at Loughborough. And then in my second year, I was speaking to a careers advisor who said, what are you interested in? I said basically nutrition, the power of food. I was always cutting out clips out of magazines to do with how I can improve my skin. I went along, shadowed a dietitian, basically thought, I can do that. That seems easy. Tell people to eat 3 healthy meals a day. I went and did the course, which back then was free, and I actually had no plans on becoming a dietitian. I just thought, I just want this free nutrition qualification. And then in my third placement, I just really enjoyed it, and it was the weight loss that I was steering towards. So in a summer, I worked for a kiddies weight management camp, so More Life, with Professor Paul Gately, and I just really loved it. So I then qualified. I spent about 3 years being a rotational dietitian, and then specialised in diabetes, so basically diabetes, bariatric surgery, and also maternal obesity. And now for the last few years, I've been working both privately and for the NHS in bariatric surgery, and on the side have my Nick's Nutrition blog and social media, which kind of keeps me in tune with the non-clinical aspect of nutrition, which is what I really love.
Nice. We're obviously going to talk a lot about bariatric surgery today, the reason kind of people end up getting there. How did that interest develop? Because that's sort of almost a very niche area of nutrition. I can't imagine hopefully I can't imagine it's not something that's booming in the NHS.
Yeah, so with regards to people accessing surgery on the NHS, you get direct access to it if your body mass index, BMI, is above 50. And other than that, your BMI has to be above 45 with comorbidities, which basically just means things that are going wrong, like problems with sleeping, sleep apnea, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, things that would be improved with weight loss. The interesting thing is that when you see a lot of people with a BMI of above 50, sometimes above 60, above 70, you realise that mobility is such a problem for these people that they don't often go out. So you don't often see people with a BMI of above 50 out and about in the streets because it's so difficult to walk more than 5-10 metres or even to access things like public transport because you realise how small the seats are. So you don't often get chatting to these people until you're in clinic. And as a dietitian, you have to undertake some sort of assessment and you have to make a decision as to does this person need to see psychology or not. And so that, I suppose, can open a whole can of worms with regards to what has led them to be this weight. And yes, there is a side of maybe a lack of education around healthy foods. Everybody knows that an apple is better for you than a Mars bar, but there's definitely is a lack of calorie awareness, maybe a lack of cooking skills, but there is also the psychological side as well. So we were talking earlier, there's a lot of abuse, unfortunately, in bariatric people's previous lives where food has been used as a comfort. So the role of a dietitian, I suppose, it does have a psychological element. However, we've got psychologists who are attached and we quite readily refer on, making sure that they're in the right headspace for surgery.
You know, I've always looked at extreme eating behaviours as a psychological, emotional issue rather than education, because there's a point, you know, I was obese as a kid and there was a point where I got big enough to go, whoa, hang on a second here, like, you know, I need to do something about it. And I didn't keep going because for me it was literally an education thing, so I knew kind of how and when to stop. You know, when you're, you know, let's open up discussion on this emotional and behavioural side around food. What are some of the reasons you're seeing people literally eat themselves into a grave? Like, this is how extreme it can get, right? What are some of the things and some of the stories that you end up like hearing about with clients?
So I think one of the most shocking, and I've heard this more than once, is almost like a child abuse case where when somebody was little, they cottoned on to the fact that if they were to eat and get bigger, it would make them more unattractive in the eyes of the abuser. And it was the first time that she divulged this information to me. And so it's stories like that, you know, really just make it heartbreaking, especially when people are out there saying, you know, surgery is the easy way out. It's definitely not the easy way out, which we'll come on to. But so definitely child abuse, unfortunately. And then I suppose it's the comfort eating side. It's the fact that some people have just got a lack of skills in how to comfort themselves from a psychological, from an emotional point of view, from a stress point of view. Some people might have even given up smoking, and what then happens to the weight? It goes up and up and up. With regards to eating, you can almost group people into 3 categories. It tends to either be large portion sizes, so literally just not feeling full, snacking and grazing, which I suppose from a psychological point of view, that's all about habit, and then it's sweet eating. So just more people have got, oh, are we back? So just some people have got a tendency to eat more sweet foods than others, and they gain more psychological and physiological pleasure from eating these foods. So some people are just wired differently, psychologically and physiologically, and obviously their upbringing is going to have a major impact on that.
So what you said there is why I'm so fascinated in the topic of obesity, because when you start to unpack all these reasons someone might be obese, there must be absolutely tons of correlating factors. Like you've just talked about some of the habits and behaviours obese people might have. And actually, we're probably now talking about someone that's quite isolated, quite uneducated, doesn't have a big support network, has maybe not ever been into sport or enjoyed physical activity, or maybe had some bad experiences when they were younger. And I'm wondering what else you tend to see as you're kind of almost doing your patient assessment. You know, am I right? Are these people also, you know, maybe suffering with some kind of early onset depression, which might actually be linked to a lack of purpose, boredom, you know, lack of career prospects, which can get anyone down and make people go towards food? You know, do they have support networks? Because, you know, when I think of people that are in a good place, they're well educated on food, they're in a good environment, they've got supportive people, it's very hard to end up getting yourself into that situation.
Yeah, and I suppose you're right. And I suppose you can get bariatric surgery at lower BMIs, but let's say if we discuss the people who reach the BMIs of 50, 60, 70, sometimes, I mean, a lack of money comes into it. And even though you can argue that healthy eating, you can do it on a budget, you can go down to Aldi and get your 5 a day. When it comes to calories and pounds, as in pounds and pence, you do get more calories from the cheaper things like ready-made pizzas and deep fried chips. So often these people, they might be on benefits, and if you look at their homes, there's going to be a lack of cooking equipment. So one guy, I said to him, well, why don't you do X, Y, and Z, and you can batch cook and pop it in your freezer? He didn't own a freezer. All he owned was a really small fridge. So you're working in an environment that isn't conducive to healthy eating or to weight loss. And so then that sets you in a spiral of, like you said, being at home, and then often alcohol might come into it. So from a point of view of alcoholism, we definitely send people to see the psychologist to get that under control. So yeah, I think it is social isolation, lack of cooking skills, lack of budget, and then alcohol can come into it as well.
So there's probably going to be a good handful of people listening to this because, man, I thought like this when I was younger and, a bit more naive and had a bit of a immaturity to my coaching ability, I suppose, that you kind of look at these people and you think, well, they're just lazy. And actually, there's an awful lot going on here, and it's completely incorrect to call someone just lazy when, as you've just highlighted, me, for example, live in a world of privilege. Grew up as a really normal kid to a certain extent, always had food on the table, like that was never really a problem, had access to sports. So when we look at actually solving this, there's an awful lot to kind of conquer. And so there'll be a load of people watching this thinking, well, what is the solution that the NHS is actually pushing? Because the title and how I started this podcast was, okay, let's look at bariatric surgery, and this is a solution for people that are in a very high BMI class. But you just talked about, this guy, he had a fridge, didn't have a freezer, had low cooking skills and awareness around food. Like, is the NHS pushing bariatric surgery as a solution in this scenario, or are there other initiatives coming and trying to be implemented? Like, would it be more wise, and this might sound ridiculous, but can we buy this dude a fridge? Can we go around and do this kind of stuff? Because actually, like, long term it's way better for him, long term it's way better for the NHS. So I'm just interested in what the NHS is doing, because I know people are very quick to discredit some of the interventions the NHS sort of appear to be implementing with people like this.
So I think once you reach a BMI point, and probably, I think 50 is a good one, I would say bariatric surgery is the only solution, because research shows that even if you put people with a BMI of above 50 on a diet, it's almost impossible for them to lose the amount of weight required to have an impact on their quality of life. So people always band about, well, just lose 5 to 10% of your body weight. Well, if you weigh 30 stone and you lose 3 to 6 stone, you're still 24 stone. So mobility is still going to be compromised, which means that the amount of length of time that you can stand to cook, even if you did have a fridge and freezer, is going to be limited. So bariatric surgery, you can lose, around 75% of your excess body weight. And our aim really is to get these people down to a BMI of around 30 or as close to there as possible. So if you asked me before I specialised, do I agree with bariatric surgery? I'd probably, like you said at the start, I'd say no. There's all these nutritional deficiencies, you get excess skin, you have to change the way you eat forever. However, once you reach a BMI point of 50, I almost say there's no point in trying another diet. Let's get you having this life-changing surgery and work with you for the next 2 years to make changes to your diet, and let's focus on weight loss maintenance, basically.
So there's been loads of people that we've seen in the news that have had incredible transformations. They've gone and lost like 15, 20, 25 stone. Is it that we can't implement that as a solution, or that just such a high percentage of the people that are at a BMI of over 50, like, they're almost beyond that level of help and intervention, like psychologically, environmentally, they're just not going to get to that place when they can have this incredible transformation? Because ultimately, the bariatric surgery is forcing an environment of extreme transformation anyway, though.
Yeah, and I suppose, you've hit the nail on the head. Some people who I work with, so one lady that springs to mind, she lost 13 stone on Lighter Life in a year. The following year, she then regained it all plus an extra few stone.
Wow.
So I know, it's unbelievable. So these people, they've got the ability to lose weight, but it's keeping it off that's the difficult thing. And we both know what effect extreme weight loss has on your body. So extreme weight loss, you get metabolic adaptation, where the body becomes, more efficient at eating fewer and fewer calories. So then it becomes more difficult to maintain a lower body weight. Let's say you reach 100 kilos versus a guy who was 100 kilos and never been above 100 kilos. The guy who's had the weight loss is going to have a more difficult time sticking to that 100 kilo weight versus the guy who's never yo-yo dieted in all his life. So bariatric surgery just gives them a helping hand with regards to the amount that they can eat. And I suppose it's so extreme and the weight loss is so vast that it's just such a massive kickstart in the right direction that you can't get, I think, from most conventional diets out there because of the hunger that comes with it. So people can do life, but eventually the hunger catches up with them and then they go back to the diet that they were eating before. With bariatric surgery, it's quite difficult to go back to how you were once eating because in most cases you've lost 3/4 of your stomach capacity.
Wow. What are some of the downsides of bariatric surgery then? Like, you're not able to eat much, which I'm assuming there needs to be some kind of like supplementation, kind of enhancement or enrichment of some side. Talk to me about the downsides nutritionally.
Yeah, so I don't think a lot of people are aware that if you have a gastric bypass or a gastric sleeve, which are the two most popular, you need to be on lifelong medications. So if you go down the NHS route, that involves a multivitamin every single day, a calcium and vitamin D supplement every single day, iron supplement, and B12 injections. And that's because your stomach produces something called the intrinsic factor that helps you to absorb B12. If you take that away, you lose the ability to absorb it from food. So you need regular injections every 3 months, and then you need a blood test. So in the first year, it's about 2 or 3 times a year, then it's annually. And if you don't stick to these multivitamins and the blood tests, then you do run a very high risk of becoming deficient, having problems with things like nerves, with your bone health, and that they're long term. People don't think about it, but if you aren't compliant, then the complications are very real. And other than the nutrition side, it's the loose skin really that often people don't think about. And it's quite sad that on the NHS we don't provide skin removal alongside weight loss surgery, which I really wish we did. And if you've been overweight, quite vastly overweight for a long period of time, that skin isn't gonna ping back to how it once was.
This is something that I've struggled with on social media before because I was about 5.5 stone overweight, lost the weight, and I would describe the skin around my stomach as just a little looser. Like if you saw me with my top off and I was stood still, you wouldn't really notice. But if I started to move a little bit, and depending on what level of body fat I had, you could see it. And it was something that I battled with when I was younger, but I'm completely comfortable with it now. I am who I am, and all that is cool. And I remember making a post on Facebook a while ago where I kind of said to people, I said, I only got to 5.5 stone overweight, and I've just worked with a guy who's lost 9 stone, and he's now going through this kind of mental battle of like he's not going to be able to reverse some of the damage that he's made. And I just kind of implored people to think and say, think about what you're doing to your body right now, because there will be a point where you cannot return from some of the damage that you've kind of created. And I suppose it's kind of almost hard to put a number on it. Like, do you see this kind of point? Is it at like almost 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stone where almost most of the damage can kind of be hidden by getting in the gym, firming up, building some muscle. And then after that, it's like you're going to be left with some serious loose skin?
There's a few things. So genetics definitely comes into it. Age definitely comes into it. And then, weight. If someone, let's say, is carrying 8 stone, but they're in their 20s, they might have a higher chance of actually having no loose skin at all. One guy who I worked with, he must have lost about the 10 stone mark. He was in his 50s. He was from the African Caribbean community, and we all know they've got great skin. He did not have an ounce of loose skin on him. Having said that, though, in his prime, he was a rugby player, so he did have a high muscle mass, and he was hitting the gym. So not only did he have good genes, he was going to the gym and building muscle and helping him to pull that skin back. So it is definitely multifactorial. If you are younger, though, obviously your skin's more elastic. Nutrition, though, does come into it, so protein and hydration. But really, I think it's the genetic side and how long you've been carrying the extra weight. I mean, pregnancy is a prime example of how the body can ping back, because it's only been stretched for 9 months. However, some women, even in the 20s, can experience stretch marks, and that's just down to genetics, unfortunately. So some things are out of our control.
I'm probably quite fortunate in that I had the bulk of my weight lost at sort of age 18, 19, and then I got straight in the gym. I was almost trying to fill that space that was fat with kind of muscle and trying to become more athletic. So it's rare that people can see those kind of scars and stuff, but you know they're there, but they're very kind of small. So I just want people to be aware of their future decisions listening to this podcast as well, because there might be people bordering on the edge of almost going a little bit too far with it, and actually now it's for us to say, if we keep going further, there's going to be some stuff you're going to be quite upset with in the future, and it's going to take quite a while to get over that. Definitely took me a while to get over that. One of the things I'm keen to finish up with today, when we talked earlier, and actually when we talked off air before we started, we talked about the reasons people get to this point in their life with their weight. A lot of emotional and behavioural characteristics, a lot of a lot of environmental things going on as well. I know of clients that I've coached where there's been things that have happened in the home, and they've appeared to be normal and healthy, and actually it's been such an ingrained pattern that pattern has been carried through into adulthood. One of the things, for example, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, where someone has been allowed to have a pudding at home if they've been good. Now that, when you're younger, is controlled by your parents. Now when you're older, that's then controlled by yourself. So when you're an adult and you've got money to buy whatever you want when it comes to the supermarket and your food shop, actually, if you decide to be good every day, you could allow yourself a pudding every day. And actually, I remember working with a client where this was a really negative behaviour because it was so ingrained from literally 16 years of childhood. Two questions, I suppose. Have you experienced this, and kind of what can we explore here? And secondly, you must be kind of wary of this as a new mother.
Yeah, I mean, great points. I remember speaking to one lady who I think she'd had quite maybe a deprived upbringing or a very controlled upbringing in that she wasn't allowed these foods. And as soon as she started work life and getting money into her bank account, that was it. It was almost like a free reign of, I've been denied this throughout my childhood and early teens. I'm just going to buy whatever I want whenever I want. So that was definitely detrimental. And then I remember speaking to a grandma actually, and she was giving her kids biscuits and puddings every single day because she was denied it. And so I think it's a cultural thing in England. We've got that grandkids need to be given chocolates and sweets, and that's how we treat them. I remember speaking to a dietitian who's from South America, and she just couldn't get her head around it. For her, a treat is like wholesome cooking around the table, or even being taken out for the day. She couldn't get around the fact that a treat was food. With regards to me, so I've got a 4.5-month-old, but already people are saying, are you going to give him chocolates and things? I would never deny my baby or son anything, because I would hate it to lead to secret eating. So I see that quite a lot where people are basically hiding wrappers in their bedroom, or let's say a lot of eating goes on at work. and one girl used to keep all the wrappers together and then put it in the bin in the street as opposed to in the bin in the office, and then there's like no trace of it. So definitely I would never ban food, but I would also teach my son, and hopefully this is what I teach patients, and the fact that there are no good and bad foods. There's good in everything, because all food provides us with calories which we need to basically function. It's just that some foods should be eaten more readily and more often than others. So I won't be buying biscuits into the house saying, oh, it's an everyday thing, but I would never deny him it if someone offered him it. For example, if we're going to a party, he won't be that kid who isn't allowed things at a party, because a party is a celebration and it's a part of our culture.
Do you think there's an age that you'll start to do things a little bit differently? Because I often have conversations with my wife as we plan this kind of stuff, and there's an argument to say, and again it's an age thing, that if they're not exposed to it, then they have no awareness of it, so it can't actually become a negative behaviour. And one of the examples I use often is drinking water. And I remember, and I've been in many situations where people have tried to force things upon kids. It's like, you have an opportunity to be naughty, quote, and eat this food, and they keep pushing it. And I remember being shocked the first time my nephews came round, and I was like, would you like anything to drink? And they were like, yeah, just water please. And I was taken aback, because every kid asks for pop or squash or whatever, but they'd been brought up on water. So it's perfectly normal for them to just have water. And now and again they have Coke and that kind of thing, but water is the norm, and they're perfectly happy with that because that was the norm.
Yeah. And I think I remember speaking to another mum actually, who she makes a big deal about a satsuma being treat food. She's like, oh, go on then, I'll let you have it. So it's about making a fuss of these healthy things that do taste really sweet and delicious. So I think it is about how we talk about these foods. And if you keep these treat foods for you or for treat time, then all of a sudden they get put on a pedestal. And children basically, they look up to those foods, and all of a sudden the first course becomes inferior. So I will always offer 2 courses. 9 times out of 10 though, that second course will be things like fruit and yogurt, so they're going to be getting some nutrition. I would never force things like biscuits and sweets on my child, mainly from a dental health point of view. However, I would never ban them just because of the psychological repercussions. And also, these kids are going to be exposed to these foods, for example, in nursery. And I remember hearing one story of a mum who, I think she was coming from a good place and saying, my child isn't allowed the cake. However, the kid then started stealing the cake off the other children. So, yeah, there's definitely a fine balance. I'm yet to get there, but parents control what the child eats and when they eat it, and then the child controls how much. So we do have a big responsibility. But, yeah, I think it's all about how you talk about foods, not banning foods, and every single food has got a place in a healthy, balanced diet, and that's the key, it's the balance.
I am extremely fortunate that when I was younger, part of my childhood, I was in boarding school. So there was there's a good buffet of food, and you're allowed what you want, but there was both healthy stuff and there was puddings. And then when I was with my mum, even though my mum was vegetarian, she was like, vegetarianism is my choice, and you don't have to eat it, so I'm going to cook you a broad selection of foods. And some days that was vegetarian, some days she'd cook a meat joint and all that kind of stuff. So actually I had a really balanced influence of my food environment, and I'm probably very thankful for that. I know it's been very different for other people, and actually when you're exposed to that for 14, 16, 18, 20 years of your life, it can be a very hard habit to undo when it is literally the norm that's just been programmed into your DNA through every day of childhood. That's tough.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to bariatric surgery, that's what a lot of patients say. This is how they've been brought up. They've been brought up to clean the plate. So that is something that I won't be doing with my son. I will never teach him to finish his plate, because that goes into adulthood, and you're overriding your hunger and fullness signals. So yeah, what you do as a child definitely impacts, just like you said.
Nick, I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed today. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and giving your time up for people. Where can people find you after today if they'd like to have a little follow on social media or check out your blog?
Thank you. So on Instagram and Twitter, Facebook, I'm at Nick's Nutrition, spelled NICS Nutrition. Or if you're a new parent or parent to be, I'm at Mummy Nutrition. So that's my latest venture on Instagram, and it's where I spend most of my time now that I've got a little baby.
Nice, good. Well, it's what you're passionate about right now, and
Yeah.
you'll put full focus and effort into that. So absolutely brilliant. I see a lot of people making that little shift in the fitness industry, and starting to talk about their experience being a parent because. Well, let's be honest, it's tough. I'm not going to say it's from personal experience because I haven't had that yet. But, there's lots of things that we traditionally know are hard when it's all about bringing up a young one with food, sleep, fitness. There's absolutely lots going on. Nick, thanks again for your time. If you are listening to this show and you are new, hello, welcome. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do subscribe. If you've never left a review for this show on iTunes, it would be amazing if you could. If anything in this show has made you think and you want to reach out to either me or Nick, do that. Reach out to us on social media, ask a question. We will always help where possible. If you've really enjoyed this show and you want to share it with a friend, please share it on social media. Please email it directly to someone. After all, this information is free. It's here to help other people. So if you think it can help someone, give it a share or forward it on. Otherwise, I will see you on the Monday Micro Show. And next week, we will be speaking probably a bit more on this topic if we want to get really granular about habits, because I will be welcoming back to the show the incredible James Clear. Right, that's it. I'm out. Have an awesome day. Goodbye.